And here we go again. So Blizzard continues to find itself in what is easily their worst PR nightmare to date after they suspended Hearthstone pro player Blitzchung for saying a little bit about his support for the Hong Kong protests, saying liberate Hong Kong. It was just like a couple seconds, and they called it a disruption to the tournament and pretended that they were enforcing rules when in reality they were appeasing the Chinese government, the Chinese market, their interest, the financial interest that they have with China. And since then, they've issued the following statement that only made matters worse, claiming that their relationships in China had no influence on their decision, which of course nobody believes. So that brings us to today's story. Overwatch for Switch. That's actually already launched, I believe. And this is an announcement that was pretty cool. A lot of people thought Overwatch was a good fit for the Nintendo Switch. And in celebration of the game's launch, Blizzard was supposed to host some kind of launch event at Nintendo World Store. So it reads right here in the Nintendo New York official Twitter page, gather your team and head to Nintendo NYC Wednesday, October 16th from 4:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. without reservation and from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. reservation required for Blizzard's launch event celebrating Overwatch Legendary Edition releasing on Nintendo Switch. The first 150 fans to sign up will get to meet voice actors from Overwatch from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. So it was not only a great event for players to gather and hang out and celebrate this title that has gained mass popularity, but some fans were even going to get a chance to meet up with some of the voice actors in this game, which I think is really cool. But on October 14th, 2019, a few hours before the game's launch, Nintendo New York announced this. Please be aware that the previously announced Overwatch launch event scheduled for Wednesday, October 16th at Nintendo NYC has been canceled by Blizzard. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. And this is in light of course, the brewing call for protest against Blizzard, not just in the internet. BlizzCon is an event that's happening on November 1st, and we are already seeing signs of people gathering together and organizing protests against them. So in my last video, I talked about Fight for the Future, which is this organization that has, quote, successfully organized the host of major protests over the last few years, including some of the internet's largest pro-net neutrality campaigns. These guys created the following website called gamersforfreedom.com, and right here they talk about how Blizzard has violated the fundamental human right of freedom of speech and how Blizzard, as an American company, should uphold the ideals of freedom of speech. And then they go through a number of actions that people who want to actively participate in protests can do. So you can sign a petition here. You can check out which companies have dedicated themselves to not censoring people and which haven't. And so you can speak out against these specific companies or call for them to make a statement. You can go to this link right here to reserve a spot for protests at BlizzCon in person. And there are things you can do like play alternative games, boycott the Blizzard games, and delete your Blizzard account if you're willing to go that far. A lot of people have actually been doing that. And on top of all that, we have got an entire subreddit dedicated to protesting BlizzCon, and they're planning to essentially bring in a lot of people with May memes, whether it's shirts and paraphernalia that they carry with them or via cosplay for BlizzCon. So we might see a lot of May cosplay and people wearing May-themed stuff featuring the Hong Kong logo and that thematically represent the Hong Kong protests, because May has actually become a major symbol in the Hong Kong protests, given that it's so appropriate, May being a Chinese character within Blizzard's own Overwatch. Now, on top of the protest Blizzard subreddit and the Gamers for Freedom website, we're also seeing this organization, Access Now, sort of calling out Blizzard. And for those who don't know who Access Now is or what this organization is, it reads right here, according to news outlet Vice, Access Now is a major human rights organization that regularly works with the United Nations, pushes back against authoritarian governments, and protects activists all over the world. It is simply put a hugely influential force for good in the battle to protect the human rights of people all over the world, and now they are involved. So this is an article, a blog post that Access Now posted on their official website. The headline reads, Blizzard must demonstrate its commitment to respecting the human rights for its users. Access Now urges Blizzard to demonstrate its respect for human rights and to reserve the penalties imposed on a Hearthstone player for expressing support for protesters in Hong Kong. Earlier this week, the gaming company Blizzard penalized the professional Hearthstone player, suspending him from the game and stripping him of his winnings for expressing support for the protesters in Hong Kong. In an open letter to Blizzard, Access Now condemned the actions, calling on the company to reverse the penalties imposed on the player and the streamcasters who covered the event. From there, we have a statement by Peter Misek, general counsel of Access Now. He said, by penalizing a player for supporting protesters, Blizzard demonstrates a lack of respect for the human rights of its users and the broader fight for freedom of expression and assembly. Blizzard needs to reset its approach to human rights. Dissent should be playable by all gamers, not locked in a loot box. Damn, that's one way to put it. Accessible only under vague corporate rules. And then from there, the blog post continued with this. As a major online gaming and user communication platform, Blizzard's practices and policies have a direct impact on the human rights of its users. With that power comes the responsibility to protect and respect those rights. Yet Blizzard's vague policies grant the company wide discretion to arbitrarily penalize users. So that's important to note. There are some people out there who are defending Blizzard by saying that they set strict guidelines that Blitzchung should have followed, except their guidelines are incredibly vague. So it reads right here, engaging in any act that, in Blizzard's sole discretion, brings you into public disrepute, offends a portion or group of the public, or otherwise damages Blizzard's image, will result in removal from Grandmasters and reduction of the player's prize total to $0, in addition to other remedies which may be provided for under the handbook and Blizzard's website terms. So it doesn't stipulate what you can or can't say. It just says Blizzard, whenever they feel like it, can decide whether you're being disreputable or whether you're offending a group. Blizzard can decide at their own whim what offending someone means. And in this case, I mean, the only group that was really offended was the Chinese government. Anyway, moving on, here's another quote by Misek, who said, as a leading gaming and communication platform, Blizzard should proceed on courage rather than fear. Transparency on Blizzard's content moderation policy is the first step towards accountability to its stakeholders. And then from there, Access Now demanded that Blizzard answer the following questions in regards to human rights. Quote, does Blizzard commit to respect the freedom of expression of its stakeholders, including players and streamcasters? What oversight does Blizzard's leadership exercise over how the company's policies and practices impact players' freedom of expression and other human rights? Who is responsible for interpreting and enforcing the competition rules? What procedures do Blizzard employees follow in determining whether its rules have been violated? What channels are available to stakeholders, including players, to appeal determinations and comment on the competition rules? Now, this article, this blog post, talked about a letter that Access Now sent to Blizzard, and you can see that right here. So I'd like to read this to you so you can get an idea for how this major human rights organization is protesting against the company. It reads right here, Dear Mr. Kotick. So we talk a lot about Blizzard, but keep in mind that the parent company to Blizzard is Activision, run by Bobby Kotick, who is the CEO. So Activision Blizzard is to be held responsible, not just Blizzard. And it reads right here, we are writing to you in light of the recent reports of the suspension and penalization of a Hearthstone player for expressing support for the protesters in Hong Kong. We ask you to reverse the penalties and clarify Blizzard's policies and practices that affect your users' right to freedom of expression, and to clarify how your policies were implemented in this incident. Access Now is a global organization working to defend and extend the rights of users at risk. We promote the right to freely express oneself, a human right enshrined in international law. In the digital age, the providers and platforms that deliver access to networks, applications, and services enable realization of free expression and other human rights. With this power, these companies retain a particular responsibility to respect and promote our rights. Blizzard is no exception. As a major online gaming and user communications platform, Blizzard has a duty to respect human rights in its operations. As the UN's Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights has recently reiterated, in reference to its call to the Hong Kong government, it is crucial to protect the right to freedom of expression and, quote, ensure that the right of those who are expressing their views peacefully are respected and protected. Peacefully is the important bit here. It'd be one thing if Blitzchung expressed his political views in a way that was disrespectful, in a way that encouraged violence, or in a way that tangibly disrupted the Grandmasters tournament, but none of that happened. Blitzchung expressed his views peacefully and respectfully, and yet Blizzard decided to punish him, and that's a core aspect of this whole debacle. The letter continued, however, Blizzard's recent actions indicate inadequate policies and practices in this area, showing a lack of respect for freedom of expression. According to statements made on the Hearthstone blog, the player was penalized for violating Hearthstone competition rules set by Blizzard. The two streamcasters interviewing the player saw their contracts terminated. Hearthstone competition rules prohibit, quote, engaging in any act that, in Blizzard's sole discretion, brings the player into public disrepute, offends a portion or group of the public, or otherwise damages Blizzard's image. Such wide discretion facilitates arbitrary implementation of what appear to be intentionally vague policies. By penalizing a player for speaking up in support of protesters, exercising their right to freedom of expression, as well as assembly and association, Blizzard demonstrates a lack of respect for the human rights of its users. In support of the right to freedom of expression, we urge you to reverse the penalties Blizzard imposed on the player and streamcasters and to provide restitution. In addition, and in the understanding that our civil society organization and others support your ongoing efforts to meet your corporate responsibility, we ask you to clarify Blizzard's policies, including how Blizzard determines when and whether to exercise its discretion. Please answer these questions, and these are the same questions listed in the blog post. So yeah, suffice to say that Blizzard has something of a shitstorm in its hands, facing protest on all fronts, and judging by the way Blizzard canceled this launch event right here, I get the distinct sense that they are feeling the pressure, they are feeling the heat. And I have to wonder whether Blizzard plans to cancel BlizzCon, kind of like how they did with the New York Overwatch launch event, given that protests at BlizzCon could potentially be on a much bigger scale than what could have happened during the Overwatch First Switch launch event. There are specific protests that are specifically being planned specifically for BlizzCon? Or do they plan to proceed with this event and pretend as if all is right with the world? I personally don't think that Blizzard will cancel BlizzCon. I mean, that event's just too big. There's just too much preparation behind it, and they have too many big announcements. I feel like Diablo 4 is definitely going to be announced at this event, for them to just cancel that, fearing what kind of protests might arise. But the event will be interesting. That's what I'll say. It'll be interesting to see how the crowd will behave at the event. Whatever their plans might be, Blizzard has to address this whole issue. And they did try with their awful statement right here, but all this did was stoke the flames. All this did was cause further backlash. So they have to do something else. They have to do better than this. They have to just really walk everything back. I mean, they kind of took half steps back here by reducing the punishment for Blitzchung, but Blitzchung shouldn't be punished at all for what he did. And the two casters, who are still suspended for 6 months, shouldn't have to face any punishment either. And 6 months, which is the punishment for both Blitzchung and the casters, is a lot of time for an esports player, for an esports professional. It's still too harsh a punishment for someone who respectfully expressed their support for the liberation of their country. I guess all we can do for now is wait and see what happens, but all I'll say is that Blizzard is definitely running scared, and their response to all this so far has been to either issue a moronic statement that still seems to support China's authoritarian ways more than anything, because of their financial interests, and to hide under a rock by canceling any Blizzard events, by canceling things like interviews. So right here, Rod Broslow highlighted that the Collegiate Hearthstone tournament involving these players who held up this sign saying Free Hong Kong, boycott Blizzard. It is still not doing any interviews, post-game interviews, and they're still not showing player cams after what happened here. So all Blizzard's been doing so far is continuously shooting themselves in the foot and then going incognito. And this is not going to die down. At the very least, this is not going to die down come BlizzCon 2019. So, I don't know what recourse Blizzard has at this point, given how much they have marred their reputation with all of this. But as we wait to find out, I'd love to hear what your take is on all of this, the various protests against Blizzard, the retreat on Blizzard's part, canceling the Overwatch for Switch launch event, in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.